Hey guys, welcome to the desktop. And as you're seeing here, I have my RHEL 8 machine up with my terminal going. And also as well on the screen, you should be seeing another laptop. And by the way, let me tell you a little bit about the setup. The RHEL 8 machine that you're seeing virtualized right now, that is in the office. And on the other laptop that you're seeing, that laptop is another RHEL 8 machine, and that is in the kitchen, which is in the other side of the house. And I'm going to show you guys something really, really cool today, and we're going to jump right into it. And it's going to be how you can control your machine that is on your network, and that machine can be anywhere. So in this particular case, you're seeing that the RHEL 8 machine that I'm looking to control, it is actually in the kitchen, and I am currently here on this machine. And when I say this machine, I called it RHEL 8 AAP. That machine is in my office. So let's go ahead and do something really, really cool. And if I were to say SSH and I want to go access that other machine, well, the name of that machine is RHEL 8, just straight up RHEL 8. And if I hit enter here, we can see now that we're logged into the machine. And it's really, really cool because you are actually on that machine as if you were sitting right in front of it, which is amazing. So if I were to do something now like sudo reboot, and I type my password, and what do you know, as you're seeing right now, that machine that is in the kitchen right now is being rebooted as we speak, which is really, really cool. So now the question is, what did we do in order to control that machine? So as you saw, it was SSH, but what does that really mean? These are the questions that we're gonna answer in this video. Hey guys, welcome back to the desktop and welcome to the next step in your Linux journey. And as you just saw earlier, we had a cool feature where we were able to remote into another machine that was on the other side of the house, specifically in the kitchen, and we were able to remote into it from the machine that we were on, which was in the office, of course. And so now a couple of things come to mind when you start seeing some magical things like rebooting a machine that can be somewhere in the network out there. What happens in that process? What are those processes called? And we're gonna dive into all the details right in this video. So before we dive into things, make sure you go ahead and give me a like for the video as it helps the channel grow. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while turning on your notifications so that way you're notified whenever we upload new videos to the channel. And share this video with a family member or friend who's interested in learning about Linux. And one last thing before I forget, make sure you check out the description as we keep all the latest and greatest things that we have going on with the channel in the description. So let's jump right into it. Earlier when we were remoting into our machine and we were sending that reboot command, there's something that runs on the machine that is remote and specifically also as well the machine that we're in front of as well. So every single machine has this. And specifically in the Linux world, it's called a daemon. Now, if you've never heard of a daemon before, you might be wondering, what is that? Now, daemon is a background process that runs continuously and waits for a specific event or task. So if you look at what we did previously, which is SSHing into a machine, and we were able to control the machine as if we were sitting in front of it, that piece of software that is running in the background waiting for those SSH connections, that is a daemon. And keep in mind that these daemons, they run until the system is shut off or you actually control the system and tell it that you want those systems off. And we'll go ahead and show you later how you control those daemons. And one thing that I like to point out is that daemons usually have a D at the end of it in order to denote that it's a daemon. If that doesn't make sense to you, I'll make sure I'll point that out to you in the video so that way you can see exactly what I'm referring to. Now, one other thing that I want to go over real quick before we jump into the terminal, and it's something that is interchangeably used between daemon and you'll often hear service. And what is a service, you may ask? On modern systems, especially systems that are using systemd, you'll often hear the term service. Now, a service refers to any background processes managed by the system. Now, this is interesting because while all daemons are services, not all services are daemons. For example, a service can also refer to a one-time job that runs in the background and completes after execution. So now the other question you might have is, well, how do I know if my system is running systemd? Now, one way you can check to see if your system is running systemd, you can go over to the terminal and type in systemctl Now you see all this output that comes out from running systemctl. And if you have this output and you don't have any errors that came to your terminal, then you are most definitely running systemd. All right, so let's get out of this. Let's clear our screen. So we just understood what a daemon is. We also talked about a service where you're constantly going to hear that, especially in distributions, Linux distributions that have systemd. I just showed you guys how to look to see if your system is running systemd. Now, if you've never actually worked with this before, the next question you may have is, well, what is systemd? And think of systemd as nothing more than a service manager. It allows you to manage the services that are running on your Linux machine. And how do we go about managing those services using systemd? Well, you just saw the systemctl command that we just used. That is how we interact with systemd. Very simple to understand. All right, guys, so we covered a lot from a definition perspective. Let's go ahead now and have some fun on the terminal, and let's really put these definitions to practice. So the first thing is how do we see these daemons and these services that are running on our particular machine? And we do that by using the systemctl command. So let's go ahead and do a sudo, and that's to elevate our privileges. Now keep in mind, we don't have to elevate our privileges, but I do it whenever I'm working with systemctl because there's some cases where you will have to elevate your privileges, and it basically gets me into the habit of putting that in even if I don't need it. So sudo systemctl list units -- type equals service -- all. And here's a list of all the services or daemons that are running on this particular machine. And you can see here that there's several columns. The first column is unit. The next column is load. The next column after that is active, followed by sub. And then lastly, of course, description. In order to view this document, as you're seeing me scroll down and scroll up, this is where you have to use the vim commands that I was teaching you in earlier videos in order to be able to navigate the document. Now, if you have not watched those videos, I highly encourage you to watch them because you're going to learn the shortcuts in order to be able to go ahead and navigate this particular document. And if we go to the end here, you can see it shows you 165 loaded units listed. So it gives you some good information all the way in the bottom. And it actually tells you what load, active, and sub means. So pretty cool how we can see all the different daemons or services that are running on this machine. And in fact, actually, let me correct myself a little bit there. Not only is this list showing the ones that are running, but it's also showing you the ones that are not running as well. Now, let's exit out of this. What if I'm interested in just viewing only the running ones? We saw both services that are running and services that weren't running, but what if I'm interested only in running? So let's go up in order to see our previous command. Let's get rid of the all here at the end, and let's type in state equals active. And here is a list of all of the services on this particular machine that are actively running. If we go all the way to the bottom, there are 69 loaded units, compared to, I believe it was 165 before. Let's double check. So if I quit out of here, we go back to all. Yep, I was correct, 165. And we quit out of that. Now here's an interesting thing. Let's go back to our active services. So if I go up to, and we have the command now that goes back to showing us all the active services. Now if I take a look at the active services and I say, gee, earlier in the video, we were showing how we were able to SSH into another machine, so meaning remotely connect to it and control it. That is an actual service. So if I were to go search for SSHD, we can see here that SSHD is loaded, it's active, and it's running. And of course the description is open SSH server daemon. Oh, and fun fact, while we're here, remember earlier when I said that typically you'll have a D at the end of the service name in order to tell you that it's a daemon? Well, this is exactly where it is. So if we look at SSH, SSH is the name of the service, and then it's followed by the D over here, and that tells us that it's a daemon. So earlier on, this is exactly what I meant when I said that there's a D at the end of the name in order to tell you whether it's a daemon or not. Now let's exit out of here. And besides looking at the services that are running, the next thing that we can do is we can take a look at what sockets are currently running on this machine. So how do we do that? Well, let's do the command in order to view the active sockets. So if we were to do a sudo systemctl list units dash dash type equals socket dash dash state equals active. And here we have a list of all the active sockets that are currently running on this particular machine. Now you may be asking yourself, what is a socket? We did not go over that. So in simple terms, a socket is a piece of code that is running in the background and it listens for incoming network connections. And once it receives that connection, it goes ahead and triggers a service. So in our particular case, earlier when you were watching me remote into that machine that was in the kitchen, you had an SSH socket that was listening for a remote connection, and that usually happens on port 22. And so once I connect to that socket, it then goes ahead and triggers SSH in order to run and establish that secure connection, so that way I can remotely log into the machine and be able to work as if I was sitting right in front of it. So in this short amount of time, guys, we've covered a lot of information. So to recap a little bit, we've covered what a daemon is, we covered what a service is, we talked a little bit about systemd and what that is, we talked about how to work with systemd, specifically using the systemctl command, and we also took a look at what sockets were. So not only did we learn what all these terms mean, but we also applied it to the use case that you saw in the beginning, where we were actually remotely controlling a machine that was sitting all the way in my kitchen, and I am, of course, in the office. Pretty cool. So now in this next section, we're going to talk a little bit about how we control these services, and specifically, we're going to use two virtual machines in order to show you how we can control these services. And the reason why we use two virtual machines is because in our next case, we're going to show you how to control the services for SSH. And if I shut down the SSH server on the remote machine, guess what? I'm going to actually have to walk all the way to the kitchen and be able to administer the machine in order to get that SSH service back up and running so I can remotely control it. And I'm a little bit lazy, so we're not going to actually do that, and we're going to utilize two virtual machines. One is going to be a RHEL 9 machine, and one is going to be a RHEL 8, which is specifically what I have in front of us right now. All right, guys, so just so you can see, I have a RHEL 9 machine here up and running. And of course, in the background, I also have a RHEL 8 machine up and running. So SSH allows us to remote into a machine and be able to work with the machine as if we were sitting right in front of it. So as you can see here, based on our previous output, that SSH is actually, in fact, active and it's running. So meaning it's ready for any incoming connections. Now here's the thing, I don't have DNS set up on this particular machine. So let's go ahead and take a look at what my IP address is, nmcli. And don't worry about these commands when it comes to networking. We'll go ahead and tackle them at a later time. So as you can see here, my IPv4 address is 192.168.1.240. Let's go ahead and bring up our terminal. Now let's go ahead and log into our RHEL 8 machine. So if I were to do SSH, use the username, which is elacosta, and we're going to use the IP address of the machine, so 192.168.1.240. We can see here that we make our connection, and let's say yes, and we're going to type in our password. So what do you know? I'm actually connected to the machine now, and I have access to run commands as if I was sitting in front of it. And how do we know that? Well, if I were to do a sudo reboot in order to reboot the machine, and let me get this out of the way here, you can clearly see, especially because I'm virtualizing the machine, that the machine rebooted itself. And so we're going to give this a minute or two in order to come back up. All right, excellent. So the machine is back up and running now. So let's go ahead and log in. Let's bring our terminal up. So as you just saw, the machine rebooted itself, and then of course SSH comes back up and it's currently running again and listening for those active connections. Now that we verified that SSH is up and running and you were able to see me control a machine remotely, now let's go ahead and stop the service and see what happens when we use the command in order to stop it. So let's quit out of this. And remember, I'm going to stop the SSH service that is on the RHEL 8 machine. So meaning that when I go to my RHEL 9 machine in order to log into it, I can't do that because the service is not running and it's not listening for those incoming connections. So how do we do that now? We were to do systemctl stop, which is very easy, of course, and then the name of the service itself. So sshd.service. And of course, you can see that based on our output over here. So let's go ahead and make sure we put a sudo in front of that because we want to elevate our privileges when we are working with systemctl. And so now let's verify that. So if I were to use the previous command, systemctl list dash units dash dash type equals service dash dash all, let's hit enter. Let's find SSH. So of course it found SSH, and I'm specifically looking for sshd.service. And as you can see here, it says inactive and it's dead. So therefore now, if I were to bring in my RHEL 9 machine and I want to go ahead and connect to it, well, as you saw previously, we have our SSH command followed by the username, at, and the IP address of the machine. And of course, this is the IP address of our RHEL 8 machine. And remember, I'm using the IP address because I don't have DNS set up, and we can talk at a later video of how to set up DNS. So if I were to hit enter here, it says, of course, that the connection is refused. And why is the connection refused? Because our SSH service that is supposed to run on our RHEL 8 machine is no longer running. So let's go ahead and do the opposite, and let's go ahead and start that service so that way we can SSH back into the machine. So let me get our RHEL 9 machine out of the way. Let's quit out of the output. So I'm going to do a sudo systemctl. Now there's two ways you can do this. You can do a start or you can do a restart. And in this particular case, let's go ahead and do a restart because the service was once running before, and I want to restart the service because it is no longer running. So let's go ahead and type in sshd.service. Now let's go ahead and verify our work. So if I were to take a look at the output now and search for sshd, and as you can see, sshd.service, it is active and running again. So if I bring in our RHEL 9 machine now, and if I were to run the same command, which is our SSH, in order to connect to our RHEL 8 box, it is now asking for our password. If I type in my password correctly, there we go. We are able to SSH into the machine, and we are able to now run commands as you've seen before. And again, we can do that and verify that by running a reboot command. So there you go. Now this is our RHEL 8 machine rebooting because we ran our command through SSH on our RHEL 9 box in order to reboot it. Our RHEL 8 box is up and running, so let me log in. So if we can type in our password correctly, we can log into the box. And of course, let's bring up our terminal, and we can see that this is our RHEL 8 box from before. And of course, here is our RHEL 9 box in the background. Now guys, you were just able to see me stop a service, and you were also able to see how I was able to restart a service. Now another common command that we use, and this is the checking of the status of a service. Now we typically use this command because it's a lot faster than going through all that output that you saw before. So if I were to do a systemctl command and type status, and then now we can type in sshd, you can see the status of sshd, and you can see that it's actively running. Now this is a little bit faster than going through all that output and finding what you're looking for. And you can see here that it's active and it's running. Now one of the really cool things that you guys were noticing, especially when I was rebooting the machine, specifically our RHEL 8 box, the service actually keeps running every time the computer comes on. But did you know that you have the ability to change that, especially when you are constrained for resources? And this is part of administering an operating system. You can control what's most important to your organization. What if I don't want this particular service running when I reboot the machine? We can go ahead and type in sudo systemctl disable, and then the name of the service. So sshd. Now let's go ahead and reboot the machine and see what we get. So if I were to do sudo reboot Now let's give this a second to reboot. All right, so the computer is rebooted. Let's go ahead and log in. Okay, great. Let's bring up our terminal. Now let's do a systemctl status sshd. Now as you can see here, SSH is inactive, and when the computer rebooted, it didn't start SSH, and it's one less thing the computer has to do, so therefore your resources can be a little lower upon startup. Now keep in mind though, because SSH is no longer running, I can't remotely control this machine any longer. Let's bring in our RHEL 9 machine and see what I'm talking about. So here's our RHEL 9 machine, and if I were to SSH, as you can see, our connection is refused because SSH is no longer running. Now having the ability to SSH is very, very useful. So in order to make sure that it starts up when the computer boots up, let's go ahead and do a sudo systemctl enable sshd, and just like that, when the computer reboots, it will go ahead and make sure that SSH is running upon startup. So let's test this out. So if I were to do a sudo reboot, now our RHEL 8 box is rebooting, so let's go ahead and give that a second in order to complete. All right, so let's go ahead and log in now. Let's go ahead and open up our terminal. So now let's do a sudo systemctl status sshd, and you can see that upon startup, our SSH is up and running. So therefore, if I were to bring in our RHEL 9 box, and I were to do SSH now in our RHEL 9 to our RHEL 8 box, you can see it's asking me for a password now. For some reason, I keep fat fingering the password, so let's try again. And as you can see, when you put in the right password, we are now able to log into the machine and we're able to work with the machine. So therefore, if I were to do a reboot command now from our RHEL 9 box, I can do a sudo reboot, and there you go. You're now seeing our RHEL 8 machine that was in the background, and it actually rebooted. Here is our RHEL 9 box, while our RHEL 8 box reboots in the background. So let's go ahead and log into our RHEL 8 box now that it's up and running. Let's go ahead and open up our terminal. Now there's one last thing that I want to show you guys, and especially when you're working with systemd, how do you go ahead and check out any particular logs or any particular errors that you may have? So the command in order to check out any errors that you may have is going to be journalctl. Now I'm going to give it a -u and then the name of the service. So in our particular case, if we're interested in SSHD, you can see here that you can go into the logs and see all the different types of information on your specific service. And in our particular case, we're concerned with SSHD. And you can see here the date and the time and some very detailed information of what's happening with the service. So in our particular case, you can actually see here that SSH on November 3rd at 15:31 started the SSH daemon, and now it's listening on port 22, which is normally the port that you'll listen on, and it's waiting for those connections. So that's a cool little way to see what is happening with any particular service, especially if you have an error. All right, guys, so we covered a lot in this particular video. And just to recap real quick, you all learned what a daemon is. You learned what a service is, especially when you're working with systemd, what that is, and how to manage services using systemd, and especially the command for that. And lastly, of course, if you have any issues whatsoever, you also learned where to find that as well. Now, I say this in every video, guys, make sure you continue practicing. Practicing makes perfect. It took me some time to get to the point where I'm today teaching you all about Linux. Now, if this video and my content is helping you out, make sure you go ahead and give me a like for the video as it helps the channel grow. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while turning on your notifications, so that way you're notified whenever we upload new videos to the channel. And share this with a family member or friend who is interested in learning about Linux, or they're interested maybe in some of my other content. There's a lot of great content that's available on my channel. So that'll do it for this one. I have to prepare for some travel, but keep practicing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.